grabbed in the name of development and through the same paradigm that we face in India and all over the South Asia to South America and in African countries as well, where it's not just the Western but even the Indian multinationals and the corporatized and privatized states of ours have joined hands, and they are hands in gloves in attacking, grabbing, taking over, or legally and legitimately acquiring land and everything attached to land. I'm referring to this because that also, at least in India, is being considered as a British legacy. In this House of Commons, to say this, I know doesn't require courage anymore, because the British Tamil Forum and the British parliamentarians also are with us. I say this because that legacy of the 19th century enactments, where the principle of eminent domain really was the main principle under which the lands were acquired and taken over, changing not just the landscapes but the lives and the sources of livelihoods that were destroyed. That has been happening in that part of the world to the farmers, fish workers, the artisans, the laborers, unprotected as they are. And yet this large section of our populations, ranging from 60 to 96%, the 96% in India, that is considered to be powerless before this principle of eminent domain. A number of projects that are imposed, whether those are large dams or in the name of infrastructure, the industrial corridors, take over using some laws but violating the procedures and the rules. Huge chunks of lands, if I can just refer to one single statistics, 10 million people to be affected in the valley of Narmada, which also I belong to. And the Save Narmada movement for last 30 years have till today saved most of the land by stopping the dam or not allowing them to be filled. But here in Sri Lanka, our friends who had extensive dialogue with me, and when I witnessed what happened in Sri Lanka as one of the commissioners on the World Commission on Dams, when we visited the valley of Mahaveli, and we realized that the laws were not followed, not even the involuntary resettlement policy. And discrimination was not only in displacing the people, and amongst them Tamils and Sinhalese both, from the areas which were to be directly affected by those projects, but also displacing them from the areas which were to be benefited. And now again, in the present context, I was told by the friends, giving the latest version with their experience and ground-to-earth knowledge and information, that those lands, even in the areas to be benefited by such a large valley project, are being taken over. In what way can they claim, when they promise the benefits, to impose the losses? But that is happening, and ethnicity and ethnicism is no doubt behind it, partly or fully. So on one hand, when we have seen that the Tamils who were wanting to gain their rights to the resources in proportion to their contribution to the country's development, when they were for the principle of self-determination and self-reliance, a truly democratic principle, and they were not wanting to build castles, but wanting to save their homes and their homelands, they were not allowed to do so. And that was what led to the conflict. With umpteen number of phases that the conflict went through, the 13th Amendment to the Sri Lankan Constitution, everyone would agree, created a hope, and the India somewhere, was proud of having mediated in that situation. But we know that whether Norwegian procurement or the India's weak or strong intervention really did not bring in the appropriate results. And so we have here the leader of the opposition in the Eastern Provincial Council, who categorically says that their rights and their domain is violated and impinged upon. So basically the issue is of peace with justice and democracy. Let me tell you again, linking it with India, that in India also this is now the crucial most issue. What right with primacy and privileges would the smallest unit of democracy, where only the direct democracy can flourish, would have and would not have? So this is the fight, the political fight now between the state and its people. The physical and the war crimes on one hand remain in the books, and the dead bodies really speak a lot. But even those not having booked and the persons responsible not having come before any decisive tribunal process, whether it was the Reconciliatory Commission or otherwise, we certainly feel that this new phenomenon at least must be taken to its logical end. And that end can only be by bringing in self-determination and truly democratic processes, not only to the Elam Tamils, but to the smallest unit of democracy, if it claims to be so, in Sri Lanka, and for that matter, every country in the world. And that's where the Tamils versus Sinhalese, that conflict may be reduced and may be controlled. Can we really go in for this? The immediate challenge is of the globalization, liberalization policies. The land grab, which is in the name of urbanization, industrialization, and militarization, all of that needs to be taken together as an issue. As far as militarization is concerned, it is very, very clear, and I'm sure the conference would debate and discuss it, when there are examples coming from the ground, where in Jaffna itself, in around 6,500 acres of land, which was left vacant by those who were forcibly, directly or indirectly evicted, that is taken over for the military camps, and it is certainly, in spite of their having the land deeds in their name, the 100 years old land deeds is being snatched away and grabbed for those who are displaced. Can we call them internally displaced? No, if that land is not only going to the army personnel who are farming themselves, selling products, and killing the livelihoods of the real owners of the land, but are also going to the special economic zones, to the corporates from China to India, then certainly they are not only the war displaced, and they are not only the internally displaced population. The externally displaced populations, mind you, are now to grow in number as in other countries, in Sri Lanka as well. I'm told that Rajapakse and his government is also taking up any and every projects, maybe thermal power project with the country like India, or the airports with his own relatives, and the harbors, which are, I'm told by Mr. Naganathan and others, have failed. Without the environmental impact assessment, in spite of the laws, without following the land acquisition laws, when that itself needs to be questioned, they are going ahead, taking over the lands and taking over the projects. Now this needs to be challenged. And that's because after the war, this is what is going to kill the people, their life and livelihood, as much as the war did. Although that was brutal and barbaric, this is also genocidal and slow poisoning, and I need not give more examples, but these special economic zones are against the economics of agriculturists, of fish workers in Sri Lanka, in Bangladesh, in Pakistan, in Bhutan, in India, and across the world, as you very well know. So let us, friends, with the sensitivity that we have come here with, let us question this paradigm of development itself, which is easily said to be neoliberal, but with the colonization history of Sri Lanka, let me call it neo-colonial. So that old colonization to the new colonization is the journey that the Sri Lanka as a country and this world has traversed through. How can we challenge all of this, which is not democratic, but which is not even human? Umpteen number of United Nations conventions of the economic, social and cultural rights are ignored and bypassed, and so the the Lessons Learned and Reconciliatory Commission, the the United Nations Experts Panel report, or the various people's initiatives like the People's Tribunals is not making much of a difference. Let's spend 1 minute on the United Nations. When the UNCTAD and a number of fora within United Nations which we have approached in different contexts and different situations related to different kind of injustices, violations of human rights and civil liberties both. In the case of indigenous people for that matter, we have realized that United Nations not only intervene into the inter-nation state wars very late and with many times flawed designs and strategies, but it fails in intervening forcefully and at right point of time in these kinds of internal civil wars. Why so is a question that we must raise.